New topic. Yeah, I am pretty passionate about this stuff. This is where the passion comes from. Um, Taking my daughter to college, I thought I knew what I was getting her in for. I thought I knew what she was getting in for. Idea. So we talked about this often. The Wells bubble burst for her. And we love the Wells bubble, by the way. Wells bubble. It was beautiful. But by saying the bubble burst and will never be there again for her ever again, it's sort of like what Charles Taylor, Christian philosopher, calls naive faith. So naive faith would be believing in Jesus because what else would I believe? You know, being a Christian because I really can't imagine the alternative. So that's gone for her in the first 5 minutes. She sits in a room of 25 very pleasant young people living seemingly valid alternatives to her faith, and she can't go back to not knowing about that and all those people. So naive faith, bubbles burst. Can't anymore believe in Jesus under the conditions of what else would I believe? No, that's done. So Christian worldview is a great concept. The thing about Christian worldview is that I can tell you what my worldview is. I can put it into words very easily. Any worldview has to talk about where we come from, what's wrong with everything, what counts as redemption, what counts as hope. Every worldview, Marxist has those four. Every worldview can tell you in words what those are. This other concept called the secular social imaginary from Charles Taylor is, I can't tell you that. I can't put that into words. It's pictures in my head of thriving. Pictures in my head of the good life, living the good life, and there's a million versions of that. But so the point is, in the classroom, they're reaching for my child's mind. P.Z. Meyer, rabid atheist, shows up in all these videos, just rabid, hater of Christianity, is her advisor, genius. So going after her mind. Outside the classroom, they're going after her loves, right? Her love, what she loves. Going after her heart. We drop her off in the dorm, and there's a bowl of condoms, and the sign says, "Have fun, girls." And it's not reaching for her mind. It's ignoring her mind. It's reaching for her heart and for her loves. And so, well, how does she survive? How does she not only survive, but bring somebody out of that into the family? A communication scholar would talk about plausibility structures. If you stay stuck in the plausibility structures or in a group that finds this plausible, you will tend to retain your belief system. Inoculation theory from comm scholarship says if you just stay in contact with the original worldview, you tend to keep it. What we'd say, true or not, what we'd say is the spirit doesn't let her alone without a fight. And she survived because just stinking proud of this girl. She's so quiet and she's so shy, and she starts a campus ministry at University of Minnesota Morris. 4 kids on a Tuesday night in a quintessential 70s church basement. She stays connected. She stays connected to the Word of God and the family of faith, and she survives. She more than survives. But the question I often ask is, when we send kids off to that kind of place, are we prepared to ever tear our hearts open and say, "Dear one, they will eat you alive if you don't stay connected to the Word of God and the family of faith." And so that's her story. I not meaning to diss the university. She met wonderful people, opened up her world. I went to a senior thing she did on psychology or whatever, and her professor, Oscar, was looking at her with as much pride as I was. So she met some wonderful people there. We're not trying to paint with any kind of broad brush. In fact, here's some research I quote everywhere I go on any topic, anywhere close to this one. What does university do to kids? To say it destroys faith is sort of misleading and not precise. We would say the university exposes young Christians who have a superficial grasp of Christian truth. If they're superficial, it exposes that. So it never had the thought go through their head that whatever the defeater is. Never had to think about that. Um, when we talk about what you want to do with these things at your local context, the challenging part is to not do any less with the foundational stuff with catechesis and all of that. We're not saying, let's do this instead of that by any means. But anyway, so kids that are superficial. 2, exposes those young people who were disconnecting from church long before they went to college, probably as sophomores in high school, is a dangerous time. And number 3, the one that gets me passionate, who have no Christian mentor to run to when the questions get hard. Exposes kids who are in that spot, and a popular professor says, well, nobody takes that book seriously anymore. Popular professor says, well, most people think he didn't even exist. And there she sits by herself. Never thought of that, never heard of it, and this thing is just, it's in there now. It just hurts your heart to think about that. No person that she will run to when the questions get hard and serious. And so, yeah, that gets me excited. The good news, I've alluded to this already a couple of times, but maybe the good news is that if apologetics, classically done, is just this sprawling study that we've kind of mentioned before, a lot of people are coming to the conclusion we don't have to all do all of that. That we can really reduce this to 2 issues with a distant third. 2 issues mainly than a distant third, which also could be important. And here's what they are again. Now we can question what's the limitation of these things, what are they useful for, what are they not useful for. I think to think of them as defeaters would be a way to address that. If I can't trust my New Testament, and if Jesus is dead, and if there's no reason to think God exists, those are ultimate defeaters. So thinking of it that way, we can't let those things go unchallenged. We can't let the misinformation just stand and do its work on a person's mind. So in an intellectual climate where Jesus rising from the dead just strikes the ear as, I don't know, just weird, it's cultural relic or something, we just can't let that stand either, would kind of be my idea. This isn't law and gospel. This isn't the thing that creates and sustains faith, but I think it still does all have a role to play. So, resurrection. The least I can say, and by the way, this session will be frustrating because we're going to be more talking about something than spilling the whole thing. The new handout that you have has all kinds of information about these issues, okay? The new handout has all kinds of detail. But have I proven that Jesus rose from the dead? The least I can say is I know all kinds of historical facts that are taken for granted with way less evidence than the resurrection of Jesus. I can say if I was in a spot to try to explain what happened, something other than what all the evidence points to, I don't know how I possibly do it. I don't have a clue how I do that. Something happened, and all the evidence there is points in one direction. I can say that. Have I proven? What have I proven? There have been famous Jewish people in history that concluded, because they couldn't not conclude, that Jesus rose from the dead. That wasn't the same as concluding he is the Messiah and the Son of God. And so there's that issue as well. So there's limitations here. We know there's limitations. But the fact that Jesus is alive is this big fact. It's just this big fact that has implications. And so I don't want someone to just easily, casually, with a word, knock that out of my child's mind or put something in there that will fight against it. You can say all you want. Nobody takes the New Testament seriously. Say that all you want. You can say all you want. Jesus never existed. It's just not what the historians are saying, no matter what kind they are. No one takes that book seriously. It's not what the historians are saying. It's not what those who give their lives to ancient documents are saying. Not at all, in fact. So, misinformation. That makes sense? Books written by eyewitnesses, incredibly credible, willing to give their all for what they had to say. And then the handout has like 20 kind of things like that. Just 20 things that add up. Same thing for resurrection. You can say, you can say there's no really reason to even think God exists, but don't say that around the philosophers because they're not all believers in the reality of God, but they all know this is robust. These are robust arguments. There is some hand-wringing going on right now today at philosophy departments around the country of all the theists that are just discovering these are very robust arguments. Why is there something instead of nothing? This fine-tuned universe, this moral argument, all these arguments are not, you can't sneeze at these because they are really incredibly strong. Incredibly strong. Proof or clues, we'll say clues. So again, the big point was I don't know if we have to do everything. I think we got to, maybe two with a distant third issues, is maybe we ought to shore up and not let somebody very easily, very casually knock the New Testament out of our kids' hands because it is a phenomenally reliable book. And so let's just go a little further at the flavor of this. Again, I'm not trying to cover in any sense these two areas. So speaking like the apostles, I'm not insane, most excellent Festus, Paul replied. What I'm saying is true and reasonable. The king is familiar with these things, and I can speak freely to him. I'm convinced that none of this escaped his notice because it was not done in a corner. So King Agrippa, you can go investigate this all you want. Go talk to the witnesses all you want. They're on every corner in Jerusalem right now today. Some have died, but most of them are still there. Go talk to them. So you may look into this. I heard a celebrity turned Christian say what he didn't know before that was the nature of the claim that Christians are making. The nature of the claim is that a thing happened in this world. It's not some metaphysical, squishy, philosophical thing. An event that happened in this world that left some marks behind. And there's an aspect of that we can investigate. We can interrogate the witnesses too, in the form we have them in the New Testament documents. And so there's all of that. Gary Habermas is a man we should all be thankful for. He's done some incredible work, and some of you know this already. It's called The Minimal Facts. Here's what he argues. Just for the sake of argument, we can limit ourselves to conclusions that have almost total consensus among all historians, no matter who they are, no matter what they believe. So there are these facts that everybody acknowledges, people that live for history. Let's just go with those kinds of facts. We can likewise limit ourselves to those New Testament books that are uncontested. We'll go there just for the sake of argument. What you end up with, I'm told this anecdotally, I don't want to say too much, but that there are liberal seminaries around the country where because of Gary Habermas's work, they would have said resurrection is this, some kind of event, some kind of metaphysical event. And when Jesus obviously bent over backwards saying, eating fish and touch me, and he's making the very opposite claim, to have physically risen from the dead. Well, at seminaries around the country that have given up on that a long time ago, there are more that are saying, doggone it, looks like he did it. Like, wow, okay, so this is powerful argumentation if you like it. Here are the facts. A man known as Jesus Christ was executed by the Romans to crucifixion. No one questions it. Later, the disciples' key word is believed. So we're arguing in a certain way. They believed it. We know that. We know they were totally and absolutely convinced of it, of physically raised Jesus. The conversion of Saul. Our resident genius at MLC is named Professor Joel Frederick. I asked him about apologetics recently, and he just talked my ear off 45 minutes on the significance of Saul becoming Paul. The conversion of James, Jesus' skeptical brother, and one that doesn't have quite as much but has an awful lot still, is still worth being on the list, and that is the empty tomb, that the tomb was actually empty. So I would have that be a recommended book as well, Habermas, on the resurrection of Jesus. It's on the handout that you now have. It's very readable, very understandable, and I don't know, what does it do for you? It kind of stirs the blood. I mean, I know Christ is true on other grounds. I was a Christian long before I knew about any of this, and so we can discuss how important is it. But again, if it were just about misinformation, sometimes what you say is, you got an opinion about masks, and you got an opinion about vaccines, you do, you got opinions about COVID. Well, you should have an opinion about this. You should have an opinion about this. You casually dismiss it like it's this thing. No. Tell me. And anything you come up with that can work with one minimal fact is going to bump up against another one. And something happened. Something happened, you guys. Wow. So my handout has a whole page written small of about 20 items, much like that. Why in the world would you have the first witnesses be women? Just why in the world would you have the first witnesses be women in that time and place? You can't think of a reason. You just can't think of one in terms of how testimony was viewed in those days. So there's a lot of things like that. It's all in the handout. This is what Habermas does. So let's say the podium were here with the baptismal font. Let's say this is ground zero. This is the resurrection of Jesus. And he does this thing, I saw a YouTube video, where he takes out this passage. And first of all, he says, by the way, earliest evidence for Alexander the Great, earliest evidence of any kind for him, is in the parking lot or whatever's 300 feet that way. The first evidence of any kind that he even existed is a football field away. Okay, so now we're looking at this. What I received, and then he says, okay, I'm 25 feet away from ground zero. No, sorry. Writing the letter 25 feet away from ground zero when he wrote this. What I received, I passed on to you. When was that? Okay, so now we're like 5 years, so 20 years away, 20 feet away. But then it comes to the first part, what I received. And now we're 5 or 6 feet away. Paul meeting Peter, and the Greek is they historied together. They sit in a room and they just talk to each other about what they each heard and saw and learned from Jesus himself. And then there's this. So this is stunning. I mean, this is in Jerusalem. That's what I just said. Skeptical New Testament scholar Bart Ehrman himself publicly acknowledges that the testimony of Christians in Jerusalem, where it all happened, which is very significant, can be dated to 2 or 3 years after the resurrection of Jesus. Paul appears to be quoting a confessional statement already in circulation by the time he was converted, 2 or perhaps 3 years after Jesus rose. And so it's argumentation, it's historical reasoning. It's not something we hang our whole hat on. But so proof, maybe not clue. It's really quite stunning. And what I'm suggesting is I would like us not only to think through the limitations of this and what it's for, what it's not for, but also to have a facility with these 2 issues. I think we want to get solid and sharp on these 2. That's my opinion. If Christ is really raised, and if this New Testament is what it appears to be, then I'm not anymore the easy pickings, God willing. So let's go to the activity. Oh, by the way, you can read that to yourself, right? The book by F.F. Bruce is about the New Testament. Can we trust it? Top shelf scholar. And just among the takeaways from the book is the fact that Luke, he convinces me, was a world-class historian. World-class. And this is just a little taste of him. C.S. Lewis says, I've been studying myth all my life. This is not what they sound like, So if it's not true, what is it? If it's not true, what kind of document is it? Realistic historic fiction that wouldn't come again for 18 centuries? Is that what it is? So anyway. Here's the question for us all. Oh, there's a lot more we can talk about. You have this in your handout. All of these are more fully articulated in your handout. The phenomenon of prophecy. Just for one example. Until 2005, there was a bit of a manuscript found in 2005. Until that happened, there was an argument you could have made that pious Christians changed Psalm 22 to say his hands and feet were pierced. That is no longer possible. Thank you, God. The evidence showed up that, no, it really said that. 2005, found in the Dead Sea Scroll area in Qumran. No longer questionable. It's just rock solid. Psalm 22 says, my hands and feet will be pierced. Before crucifixion was invented, by a long shot. So there's a lot. Spotlights pointing at the stage, letting up the figure, maybe. Anything else I should comment on? The historic advantage. Christianity not asking us to believe what one person said, like Joseph Smith or Muhammad, but intersecting with known history, known places, events, people in 1,000 ways. And where it is verifiable, where it can be empirically tested, it passes marvelously. There's some open questions out there. Of course, there are things like that, but nothing significant. So making it self-falsifiable, you just got to find the body. And there's a lot of ways it makes itself falsifiable. It suggests all kinds of evidence that could be brought up that would make it all come crashing, but not going to happen. And so there's a lot more there in fuller articulation, again, in the handout. So with that, the question is, how long does my time go? Does anybody have it in front of you? Sorry. 2:30. Okay. Here's what I was going to do. I'm not sure if I can do it with how the breakouts have gone. I wanted to have people in the same context discussing what, if anything, should we do about defeaters, resurrection apologetics, New Testament apologetics? What, if anything, should we be doing? And I wanted to say, after like 5 minutes, now send a liaison to another group and share with that group the best thing from the first group, and then bring their ideas back. It would have been kind of a neat thing, but I'm not sure it's going to work. Let's just let you talk and not put that rigmarole in there. Hopefully, move if you need to. If you're from the same context but not sitting together, once you find each other, it'd be a good conversation to have from people who serve in the same place or live in the same place. Okay? Once you find each other and once the talk is going, I'm just going to let you talk for, 15 minutes. So go ahead. If I come around and the talk is running out, we can shorten the time. At 15 minutes. If you're here by yourself or just as a pair, you may join any other group. That's totally fine. All right. Thank you. Seemed like without the rigmarole I was planning, moving people, that was more than enough time to start that conversation. In a moment, I'll open it up in case anybody wants to put your ideas out there, if you have some interesting idea. It's okay if that doesn't go anyplace. Let me start while you're thinking about that, finish briefly the book recommendations. So this handout has all the books on top that I might have talked about, and I talked about some of them. The next 8 pages are from a class I teach, really just putting the foundational stuff that needs to be in our heads, like the nature of faith and unbelief. All of that is 8 pages for a kind of a jigsaw activity we do. Then comes the detail on resurrection apologetics, and then New Testament. I end the year in that class, by the way, of having every student has a positive argument to make and prepare, and it's just cool. There's something just so refreshing. The man who happens to divide history into a before and after has prophetic credentials. You say that again. The man who divides history into a before and after happens to have prophetic credentials that no man can arrange for himself. It's fun to think about those things, that whole list we had. Here is the Habermas recommendation, a very, very strong recommendation. Resurrection apologetics for a higher level. This wouldn't be for high school kids. That's the book I mentioned, Luke being a world-class historian. F.F. Bruce is the scholar there, top shelf New Testament scholar. This is, I think, a really strong recommendation. A book that combines, in a very common sense way, argument about the reliability of the Bible with where he takes it is to the resurrection of Jesus. So under one cover, those 2 issues covered in a very accessible way. So Gilbert, Why Trust the Bible? Short book, really, really worthwhile. And that you could put into a younger person's hands potentially. And most of these we saw. This was a good day for a dad. This is a book I would give to a college student. Gave it to my daughter Abby on her way to Morris. Borrowed her car one time, and I find in the back that she has photocopied it and marked it up and scribbled it over. That's how seriously she took it. This book begins with a striking claim from a Missouri Synod writer, Gene Edwards Veets, that it's not that I was able to maintain my Christian faith when I went to the university. It's that I found it to be every advantage. in thinking clearly and robustly about all the issues that were at stake where I went to school. His preface makes that case, and it's quite astonishing how he establishes that. On page 10 in the normal handout is just a flavor of that book. What does he mean by, well, what I just said? So, some recommendations. With that, there are others. I don't need to talk about all of them. Anybody want to put your hand up and share an idea?